Our Around the World segment tonight, big news for supporters of the State of Israel. Reports say that in an upcoming speech, President Trump is set to announce the U.S. will officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While Israel claims Jerusalem as its seat of government, no foreign embassies are located there, and formal U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as the Israeli capital would set the U.S. apart from the rest of the world. Make no mistake, this is good news, but the announcement is essentially guaranteed to anger Palestinians. And U.S. government officials are already warning U.S. diplomats in the Middle East to prepare for increased violence in the region. With me now from the Center for Security Policy, Kyle Shideler. Kyle, good to see you.
Liz, always good to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, Kyle. So people are saying, they're asking about the timing of this announcement or the timing of this report. We'll call it a report because it's just a hair more credible than a rumor here. But liberals are essentially saying, well, President Trump is introducing this idea now because he's trying to cover or distract from something that's not going well. And Kyle, that is not, in fact, true. It's false because every 6 months a president has to make this decision whether to move the embassy to Jerusalem or whether to sign a waiver that prevents it. And that deadline is coming up on December 4th.
That's right. And we know that President Trump does not enjoy signing these waivers. We had a similar situation with the Iran deal, and it was really one of these things that irritated him to have to do again and again. So he really wants to resolve this issue, I think, for good.
Right, and it would be the right thing to do. This is the official White House statement from it when they were asked. They said, quote, "The president has always said it is a matter of when, not if. The president is still considering options, and we have nothing to announce." If they do announce it, that should be Monday or Wednesday at the latest here. Talk to me a little bit about the details. So some of the criticism levied against a move from our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, some of the criticism is that it would set back peace agreement talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Is that an accurate analysis?
I don't think so. We're hearing the same objections from the same sorts of people that we have always heard. You know, that it will anger the Arab street or that it will set back the peace process. And those are really bunk. The reality is that there is no peace process to speak of right now. We know reconciliation between Hamas and the PLO is really not going very well. So it's not really clear who to even talk to if the Israelis were going to talk to anyone. The other thing is the Arab street right now is frankly not concerned with Jerusalem. They are interested in, more than anything, Iran. They want U.S. assistance in dealing with Iran and its ambitions in the region. We even know that communications between the Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, and the Israelis are better than they have ever been. Relationships between the Egyptians and the Israelis are very good, all of which points to this is a good time to make this move. And the reality is getting this off the table, recognizing, which everyone does if they're going to be honest, that the Israelis will never move the capital from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is always going to be the capital of Israel. And recognizing that will actually put us on the path to peace because we can put this behind us and deal with issues that are actually substantive.
Right, instead of dealing with a surface issue. I guess I didn't understand the argument about setting back peace agreement talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis because you can't have a peace agreement. There's no legitimate, tangible talks happening when the Palestinians don't recognize the right of Israel to exist, and they don't. There's no way you can come to the table and broker any kind of deal if you don't recognize the legitimacy of existence of the person that you're trying to negotiate with, and the Palestinians certainly don't. Kyle, also explain for our viewers, if you will, what it means by the undivided capital of Israel, because there are basically two routes the president could take here if he moves the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He could declare it to be the undivided capital. What does that mean?
Well, Liz, that's what we're going to wait and see. Now, if he declares it the undivided capital of Israel, he's essentially giving the Israelis what they have always said, which is that Jerusalem as a whole city is the capital of Israel. Now, the UN and certainly the Palestinians insist that there has to be room for a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem for a Palestinian state. And if the U.S. should agree that it's going to be the undivided capital of Israel, they're essentially saying that that condition is off the table, and they're not taking that condition seriously. I think that's a good move. I think this is the time to declare the undivided capital of Israel is Jerusalem, as we all know it is in fact, and we can stop playing around with this game. That said, I'm not sure that's the move they're going to make. I think these fights are probably still taking place even as we're speaking in the administration. I'm sure Tillerson and Secretary Tillerson and the State Department are very much pushing to minimize this move, whatever happens on Wednesday. And probably elements in the Trump administration, certainly Vice President Pence, we know, is very much in favor of this move. So probably still debate going on within the Trump administration as to how far-reaching this declaration is going to be.
Right, and I think it might even go one step further than that. There were reports that said Secretary of Defense James Mattis, as well as Secretary of State Tillerson, both have warned that moving the embassy at all, moving it at all from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem would pose a threat to U.S. diplomats in the Middle East. By making a comment like that, it perhaps is stating the obvious. I think the State Department has already sent warnings to U.S. diplomats in the region, warning them about a possible uptick in violence next week as this happens, or when or if it happens. But by making comments like that, Mattis and Tillerson seem to me to be saying that they might not be in favor of the move at all.
And I think that's very likely. We've seen both from the State Department and the Pentagon a tendency to err on the side of caution, if you want to be polite about it. But I think, you know, they've really been out of step with certainly the President Trump of the campaign. You know, when President Trump came out against Qatar as a terror financing nation, both Secretary Mattis and Secretary Tillerson were out of step. And that's a situation where Trump is really in line with our Saudi and UAE partners and with the State of Israel, and Tillerson and Mattis were out of line. And I think we are seeing something similar here.
Right.
Trump
and
should go with his gut. He should go with what he said on the campaign trail.
Right, you can't acquiesce to terrorism either at the same time. While it's important to secure our diplomats and our troops in the Middle East, of course, no question, you can't not do something that is right just based off of someone who is wrong threatening to harm you for it. And that seems to me that that's the case in this particular situation. We'll have to wait and see until either Monday or Wednesday, whenever this speech drops from President Trump. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. All right, guys, our next tipping point with Andrew Lewis. The Washington Post trashes the GOP tax plan, claiming 38% of Americans will not see income tax cuts under the bill. But how can you give tax cuts to people who don't pay taxes? We're going to cut through the talking points with the truth. Stick with us. That's straight ahead.